the flags in the back of the room. This meeting is being conducted in compliance with the Open Meetings Act. The Verona Board of Education passed a resolution at its meeting held on March 27, 2012. The meeting set forth the schedule of its regular meetings, which resolution was within 7 days of passage. The schedule was sent to the Verona City Road Times, the Star Ledger, the Herald News, the Township of Verona, and the Verona Education Association. Postings of this meeting setting forth the time, location, and agenda were posted in each of Verona's 6 schools, the board office, and town hall. This posting was also sent to the other newspapers, all SCA presidents, and SCA liaisons. The Verona Board of Education operates under consent agenda format. Any board member has a right to have an item pulled to be voted upon or discussed separately. Copies of tonight's agenda and resolutions have been made available to the public present. Mr. Eunice?
Here.
Mr. Block? Here. Mr. Elliott?
Here.
Mr. Bellino?
Here.
Mr. Quattrochi?
Here. Okay, we have our business meeting tonight, which is a pretty straightforward agenda. And just a couple of resolutions to do here at the end. So, but we do have 2 presentations tonight. The first one is Mr. Uncle's Brookdale students. And then right after that, we'll have Paul McDivitt do our buildings and grounds update.
Good evening. I'm very happy to be here tonight as we present our programs that we do over the course of the year under the heading of Brookdale Cares. At Brookdale Avenue School, we strive to help students understand the importance of helping others by providing for those who are less fortunate. Fostering a caring community at Brookdale builds a foundation of caring for the future. Through participation in these types of activities, students can see that their efforts make a difference in creating a better world. First up, from Mrs. Gordon's first grade class, are Tanzila Ahmed and Elliot Ziebert, and they're going to talk about Heavenly Hats.
Here was students, and what can be unvisible and related and fancy. The Heavenly Hats program provides hats to individuals and happens to help patients feel better about themselves and to give them the exercise and help them with their life. The habit is more single of hope and love that has the power to brighten the patient's day. Anthony Liana started the Heavenly Hats Foundation in 2001 when he was just 10 years old. The program was started to provide brand new hats for cancer patients and other medical patients who lose their hair due to illness. To date, over 1,200,000 new hats have been donated free of charge to patients in need. Brookdale held its 7th Heavenly Hats parading up to the suicide after the residents were down to wear hats to school. This year, Brookdale students are proud to have raised $240 for Heavenly Hats.
And why do you like that Brookdale participates in Heavenly Hats?
If people see them without hair, they might think they look funny and laugh at them. I like that we're able to buy new hats for them to help them feel better.
Thank you. Great job. From 2nd grade, Mrs. Zimzak's class, Emily Baumgard and Bella Malanga will talk about the Pennies for Patients program.
During Spirit Week, each February, Brookdale students raise money for the New Jersey Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. Since 1994, more than 200 $111 million have been raised for research and patient services by more than 10 million elementary, middle, and high school students throughout the country. For a $2 donation each day during Brookdale Spirit Week, students participate in Crazy Hair Day, Pajama Day, Favorite Color Day, Sports Team Day, and Verona Day. Last year, Brookdale students raised $535 for Pennies for Patients.
Girls, what do you like best about Pennies for Patients?
We get to do something fun while we raise money to help others. I like Pajama Day because you can just get up and you don't have to worry about choosing what to wear.
Thank you, Emily and Bella. My third grade students, Christian DeSpeci and Ashley Duhaney, are going to talk about, they're from Miss Flynn's third grade class, they're going to talk about the pajama program that we have during our book fair.
The Pajama Program is a non-profit organization that provides new books and new pajamas to children in need, many who are waiting and hoping to be adopted. Classrooms across America have collected more than 180,000 pajamas over the last 3 years. For each pair donated, Scholastic Book Clubs also made a book donation directly to the Pajama Program National Headquarters. The pajamas and books are then distributed by Pajama Book Program to children in need throughout the country. The children who receive these pajamas live in various situations, including group homes, shelters, and temporary housing, and often move from one place to another. Most of these children have never enjoyed the simple comfort of having a mother or father tuck them in at bedtime with warm, clean pajamas and bedtime stories. Because of our desire to help others as well as our love of reading, Brookdale students are happy to participate in the 4th annual Great Bedtime Story Pajama Drive this year. Last year, Brookdale families provided 25 sets of books and pajamas to needy children.
And why do you think it's important for us to help others?
There are a lot of people who don't have the things that we have, like pajamas, so we can give these things to them. Helping others is like learning how to ride a bicycle. First you don't know how, but people help you, and then you know how to do it. Once we help others, we can make their lives better and better.
Thank you, Christian and Ashley. Our 4th graders, Selena Caraballo and Killian Blitz from Mrs. Srigliano's class and Nicole Thompson from Mrs. Still's class, will talk about happiness is sharing.
During our Happiness is Sharing Week from December 10th through December 14th, Brookdale students and their families adopt local families to provide gifts that will help them enjoy the holidays. Working with local agencies, each class receives the names of the family members along with their ages and their wish list. Brookdale families then decide which items they would like to purchase for that person. Your students and families' generous donations, this worthwhile program provides much needed and helpful items during the holiday season. During December, we are also collecting gently used coats for the New Jersey Cares Coat Drive.
And why do you think, Selena, it's important for us to help others?
It's important to help others, not just because it is a nice thing to do, but because it makes you feel good to do it. Michael Matarazzo shared that if people don't have basic needs like coats and gloves, we can help them by donating these gifts.
And how do our 4th graders help with this particular program? Nicole?
4th graders came up their lunchtime recess to wrap the present and put the name tags on them.
Since we're the oldest and we know the right thing to do, we lead the school and set an example for us.
Thank you very much. Along with these wonderful programs that the students talked about tonight, we also hold a juvenile diabetes walk every 2 years, and in our 2 previous walks, Brookdale students and their families raised over $8,000. I'd also like to recognize Brookdale's Brownie Troop this year. They recently gathered donations of cleaning supplies, baby supplies, and other much-needed items for victims of Hurricane Sandy on Staten Island. I want to thank the Brookdale students and families who joined me here tonight. I'm very proud of you students. You did a great job. I also want to thank the entire Brookdale school community for their support of the various charitable events that we hold. Through their support and our students' participation, I'm confident that Brookdale students are learning an important life lesson that can only be taught through our actions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rampola, and thank you to the Brookdale students and families for coming out tonight. I appreciate it. Sometimes it's hard for us to actually see what goes on, so we like to bring you into our meetings to actually get a look firsthand. So we appreciate it. Thank you. Great job. So especially for the Brookdale students that are in pajamas, that are ready to go home, and get the ones that are not in pajamas home into pajamas. Thank you. Okay. All right, but before we get on to, let's do the second presentation next. That's Mr. McDivitt, who's the head of our Buildings and Grounds department, is going to give us an overview of facts and storyline around our P&G facilities as a whole, budget, priorities, etc.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Paul McDevitt. I'm the Director of Facilities for the Verona Public Schools. And as Mr. Petrocchi said, I'm just going to give an overview of the district's facilities, where we stand, where we'd like to be. So I'll just get into it. Just starting with the mission statement that we created recently for the Facilities Department. I thought it was something important to have as something for us in the Facilities Department to refer to, and just have us working towards a common goal. So it just says, the mission of the Verona Schools Facilities Department is to provide the safest, healthiest, and most inviting environment possible for our students and staff. We will always strive to do this in the most efficient, cost-effective manner, and provide the highest level of customer service for our 6 schools. In addition, we will always look to employ practices and policies which will lead us in accomplishing this mission. And this ties to our strategic plan, Strategy 7, our strategic plan. Basically, is with regards to facilities, and this mission statement just is in keeping with the strategic plan. And that's strategic plan, Strategy 7, just speaks to the things that I just referred to in our mission statement. And it says, refers to the existing structure of all school facilities not addressed during the construction and renovation projects for Land Associates Needs Assessment 2004. Create a safe and secure school facilities following local, state, and federal recommendations. Establish a checklist for safety and quality life standards to be maintained in each school facility, which we do. Maximize parental cooperation in the following safety areas: vehicular traffic at school drop-off and pickups, which the district is very adamant about, and kids really get involved with. and then food and snacks brought into the schools or sold in the schools. Something else that the district's been very much on top of. Provide a positive, inviting atmosphere in each building through welcoming facilities and courteous personnel, and that's our goal. The presentation topics for tonight are long-range facilities plan, just an overview of what that plan is, facility priorities, facility challenges, current facility budget, and then just a summary. The long-range facilities plan, basically all schools in the state of New Jersey are required to provide a long-range facilities plan for their district, which we submit to the Department of Education. And basically that surmises all the needs of the district, or you try and capture every need of the district as best you can within that long-range facilities plan. And that creates the baseline for improvements for school districts when we apply to the state for capital projects or capital improvements. Point two, DOE requires that each school district maintain this LRFP and that data-driven action plan for physical improvements. The long-range facilities plan provides data regarding physical assets, site assessments, student enrollment projections, and action plans for improvements. The district updates its long-range facilities plan as needs are identified. So basically, we have this baseline, we add to it as additional things either become evident or infrastructure, aging infrastructure continues to break down. More is added to that long-range facilities plan as we go. Facility priorities. The Director of Facilities works collaboratively with the superintendent and the board to identify facility needs and establish a list of priorities. This is our 5-year plan and our priority matrix, which is what I handed out to the board earlier. They're pretty much all familiar with that plan because they helped to develop it. And basically, it takes items that are on our long-range facilities plan, and it takes things that are more current issues that we have to basically either address immediately or in the near future. And by laying it out over 5 years, it does it in a way where we can schedule projects, but it also identifies where our deficits are in terms of, especially in terms of the budget necessary to complete those projects. And as the board is well aware, we see where this large deficit is between what we can actually accomplish within our existing budget and everything else, which is a big figure, obviously. And then the priority matrix is something we came up with a couple of years ago to try and subjectively, there's some subjective qualities to it, but it's how we prioritize what's the most critical thing to be addressed within that 5-year plan. What are the most immediate needs? Health and safety, priorities established based on criteria of health and safety for our building occupants, and provide a school environment which supports student achievement. That's basically what we come back to every time. We look at this, what do we need to do now to ensure a school environment where the kids can learn, they feel safe, they feel secure, and we're confident that there's a healthy environment for them to do that. Highest priority needs from priority matrix estimated costs. These are a dozen or so items that we identified as the most critical at the moment. Not to say that you brought someone else in and they not necessarily agree with every one of them, but from our standpoint, these are the hottest issues at the moment. Heat controls, essentially, for the most part here at VHS, since 1992, I'll get into the next slide, but since 1992, we've identified heat and controls for the heating as a district-wide problem that's been hanging out there to be contended with for a long time. Doors to security, 350,000. These are all our own estimates. Lower turf field turf, 1.7 to 4 million, just depending on the scope of the work. Sidewalks, $100,000. Blacktop, $450,000. Exterior masonry work, bricks, mortar, exterior entries, on and on and on, 300,000. Fire alarms for FN Brown and Forest. They have fire alarm systems in place, obviously, but they're antiquated systems that are overdue for an upgrade. Classroom ceilings and lighting, $175,000. There's about 20 rooms in the high school right now that have the original ceiling still, which may not sound so bad. There are tiles falling from the ceilings. We can't necessarily find replacements for those tiles anymore, and the lighting is just antiquated. Technology, which Cindy Costanza is here to speak to that. We have a dated infrastructure of technology. It's not up to speed for a modern classroom these days. And then backup power, backup generators. The storms of the last few years have kind of highlighted the fact that we really need generators here, especially at the high school and possibly the middle school, just to protect all those vital equipment and technology that we're trying to ensure stays in place through these storm events. Kitchen upgrades. Our kitchens at the middle school and high school are the same thing. Much of the equipment's original. The electrical systems need to be upgraded at both locations. And in addition, for the VHS band, music room, we put a price tag on that of $40,000. That's based strictly on square footage. We think a 2,000 square foot addition could really aid that program. It's the largest program at the high school, which involves about a third of the students, and we'll see that on a later slide. And then VHS Brookdale gym bleachers at about $150,000. And we'll get into that as we go along. VHS heating systems and controls. We have antiquated controls, original to the building, and hot water pumps that were identified for replacement back in 1992. They're still in place. VHS boilers are 30 years old. 20 years is the average life expectancy for modern boilers. Since they're not made with asbestos and things like that anymore, they just don't last as long. Inefficient boilers, pumps, unit ventilators, and a lack of proper controls equals higher utility costs. Irregular heating equals distractions and discomfort for occupants, the staff, and the students. And those distractions are really what I feel is the biggest driver for making these improvements. When we talk about the strategic plan, the first 5 aspects of the strategic plan are based on the education piece. The last 2 pieces that kind of get overlooked are the technology and facilities pieces. And really, I think those 2 areas need to be brought into balance with the rest of the priorities for the strategic plan to ensure that we provide the best education for the kids. If you have all these distractions in the classroom, it's difficult for them to learn, it's difficult for the teachers to teach. VHS heating system concerns. This is something that came up recently at the start of this heating season, and it's just an indicator of what we have out there in the building in terms of the piping. Obviously is original to the building. This is, we're just fortunate that one up adjacent to a urinal in the boys' bathroom here at the end of the music wing. When the pipe burst below the concrete slab, all the water was pouring into the urinal. That was the upside. The downside is a difficult thing to repair, obviously.
And when something like that happens, what's the residual effect of the building for the day?
Yeah, I mean, if it's obviously it's cold weather, which it was at the time, we're forced to shut down the entire heating system to make that repair. The way the school was designed originally with this hot water loops, and with the age of the valves that are in place, there's no real way to isolate certain areas of the building. We're compelled to shut down the entire heating system to be able to contend with one problem.
Is this the ISD's priorities for the entire school district, or are they just one school, or are they prioritized according to program?
Well, our biggest issues with heating are here at the high school. In previous years, previous referendums, boilers were replaced at the other 5 schools in 1997. Heating controls were put in place at those schools. VHS, for whatever, for a number of reasons, was left last, and it kind of got shelved the last referendum and one prior to that. And the same thing, other things probably took priority at the time. But as you said, VHS is overdue to get this piece sorted out. Heating system controls continue. This is just, on the left is just an example of the type of wear and tear these boilers, fire tube boilers go through on a regular basis. And It may seem $2,500 to replace that part, may seem insignificant when you're talking about, type of money we're speaking of to replace the whole system, but it's just an indicator of the wear and tear that goes into, each heating season. On the right, that's what the inside of these large industrial-sized boilers look like. It's a fire tube system, and the problem with the fire tube system is we're required to open those up every year, for one, to clean them, and secondly, to make repairs. And every time you open up these boilers, you're allowing air into the system, and air and then cold water leads to corrosion every time they're heated up and cooled down. And it's just it's typical of this type of boiler, and they had their time. It's just there's obviously newer and better ways to heat these buildings that's available, and it's just a problematic system basically. The more we have to open and close them for repairs or any type of other issue, it just leads to more corrosion in boilers, which leads to failure. Exterior doors, it's a pretty significant issue across the district. VHS in every school has examples of this, where on the left side it's a landing on a side entrance. It's not captured that well in that photo, but there's significant deterioration of the door on both the interior and exterior side of the bottom, where if any one of us walked up there, we could kick right through the bottom of the door. We've put a mending plate on the inside. We could do the same thing on the outside, but it's just putting off the inevitable that they need replacement. The doors on the right-hand side are the rear of the H.B. Whitehorn Annex wood shop, and I could go around to every one of those doors on that annex, and in fact, around the entire school, and find examples of what you see on the right side there, where there's basically a mending plate to keep rodents from running in underneath the door on the left, and then a mending plate on the frame as well, because the frame's rotted out at this point. The football field, I think everyone's fairly familiar with the recent events with the football field that now is closed and most likely will remain closed until we have a long-term solution, which we don't currently have. And that photo is the most recent sinkhole that appeared about a month or so ago. And it's just an indicator of what's going on below the surface. The picture on the right is just an example of what was used to create that field. They trucked in fill from a construction site in early 1970s, and these photos are just a continuation of that. Basically, what we wound up with was stacked layers of concrete and 1.25 inch rebar, and it's pretty continuous along that slope, and it's apparent as you walk that hillside is that everything you see on the surface here, you have to assume that that's what goes back right underneath the football field, and it makes a lot of sense when you look at it. You go back to that previous photo of that sinkhole, and then you go to these photos of seeing how that concrete is stacked below the surface, that it creates all these voids for the soil at the top 18 inches or 2 feet of the field, as runoff and deterioration occurs below the field over the years, over the course of 40 years, you're going to start to see more of these sinkholes appear, because the term that the engineering firm used was migrating soil. So as you have runoff, and we're on a slope site, catching runoff from the hilltop and everything above us, and it's migrating and finding its way down to the Peckham River. So as it crosses underneath that field, it's going to continue to move soil into these voids that are created by the concrete being stacked up. And with that, we're going to wind up with sinkholes. Obviously, we've had a few over the years now, so that's not a problem that's going to go away. Sidewalks, same thing. This is kind of a district-wide issue where they just need to be replaced at this point. In front of the high school, we've got obviously a tripping hazard on the left-hand photo. This is the horseshoe in front of VHS. Whether that was due to the curb heaving or the sidewalk settling, I'm not really sure, but either way, we've got a concern that has to be contended with there. On the right side, this is more of my own personal preference. And you can see with this cow path, as I described it, on the music wing entrance, you know, anyone that comes in and out of this building every day knows that the kids travel, not necessarily on the sidewalk, but cut across that patch of what used to be grass, or may have been grass at one time. You know, just, if we're gonna do a sidewalk project, I'd like to see that sidewalk widened, and then maybe do something just to, you know, cut down, or, you know, prevent kids from, you know, having to walk across the grass and necessarily get where they're going. Obviously, it leads to erosion. You know, grass is never going to grow there, and again, it becomes a tricky hazard. That erosion just continues to erode away the soil around the sidewalk. So widening the sidewalk makes sense. Driveways, parking, asphalt playgrounds. The driveway and parking aspect is a district-wide issue. The asphalt playgrounds that we have at like Forest Avenue, for example, or FM Brown, you know, the kids play on those surfaces. They don't last forever. Obviously, the blacktop deteriorates, and they're overdue to be built and repaved. Around the catch basins, obviously, same thing, aging infrastructure. You know, the side wall that those catch basins gives way eventually, and then everything, just like the football field example, migrates into that void in the catch basin, and then you want to sinkholes around the catch basins. Blacktop continues, just, you know, the horseshoe again, and then the left side, you know, Forest Avenue School, where we've closed in the stairwell. We're having a water infiltration issue for the computer lab at Forest Avenue, which is below grade. You know, the only course of action to take with that was to block up the stairwell, abandon the door, and fill it in. But now, you know, we're left with this to contend with. And what they had done here years ago, it was probably the cost-effective way to go at the time, is instead of repairing sidewalks around the school, they poured over the top of the blacktop. But obviously that doesn't last forever, so we're left with the aftermath. Exterior masonry issues. The left side's Brookdale's front entrance, obviously. You know, from a safety standpoint, those stairs are actually not in that bad a shape. It's more of an aesthetic, and then, you know, there is some deterioration that, you know, should be repaired. You know, ultimately, yeah, we'd like to redo that whole front set of stairs, and ideally be the way to go. The right side is actually a bigger concern for me at HB Whitehorn. The entrance there, I mean, if any of you, go in and out of the middle school or have kids there, marble steps. We don't live in Greece, obviously, so this isn't Parthenon. You know, they may be practical in that climate. They're not really practical in our climate. In the wintertime, you know, obviously marble becomes very slippery, and year-round, those steps are in bad shape, where you can see in the photo there's a lot of undulation between the slabs of marble, and then and a few of them actually, you know, rock back and forth. So, you know, my recommendation would be to go just to a simple set of brick and limestone steps to mirror what the town hall has at the library, and that's exterior masonry issues. Some other examples for Forest Avenue School. You know, there's a fence along the back playground there that is just rotting out in concrete at this point. Needs to be contended with. It's a safety concern, obviously. Verona High School, this photo probably isn't going to show up that well to many of you, but you can see that the mortar is bulging out of the joints in multiple areas, and this is another district-wide issue. We have it at most of the schools. The worst examples are Verona High School, probably, and then Brookdale. We have mortar protruding from the joints. Obviously, when that starts to happen, then water can infiltrate, and then you wind up with all the interior issues that go along with water infiltration. We spoke to some interior finishes, get destroyed, obviously, diminished indoor air quality, and some of the other things that have to go along with water infiltration. Fire alarm panels at FM Brown and Forest Avenue. These are just overdue for an upgrade replacement. They're just problematic systems. The biggest problem we have here, both, like I say in the description, both schools have the same EST RC3 panels. These panels are obsolete and replacement parts are unavailable. The only thing that saved us in the last few years is that we saved some panels that were in the other schools during the last referendum, and we were able to use parts from those panels to repair these, but we've kind of depleted that supply, so now we're compelled to replace these panels. Ceiling and lighting upgrades. This photo is taken here in Verona High School, and if you walk around these center corridors and look up the ceilings, you'll see a lot of examples just like this. This is a district-wide issue, though, which revealed a more attractive and energy-efficient classroom with fewer distractions. You have to keep going back to fewer distractions because really that's, at the end of the day, that's what it's about for the kids and the staff. You know, the lighting piece obviously is going to yield some savings with an active lighting upgrade, and then drop ceilings would, eliminate this, horrible looking ceiling and the safety aspect of tiles falling potentially on someone. Technology infrastructure, Cindy Costanzo is going to speak to that much better than I can.
I'm just going to take a couple minutes out of Paul's giant presentation here to talk about the technology infrastructure. The picture you see up there is actually taken in that little room right back there. Most of this was established in 2003. It doesn't only support Verona High School just because it's here in this building. Every school comes back here for their telephone service, their email, their internet. When Verona High School has no power or no internet, all the schools lose telephones, internet, and connectivity back to the high school. The network isn't just about our grading system, which is Genesis, where everybody gets their grades. It's not just about teachers getting email. It's not about document storage, but it's also a huge part of education. The world has changed, and our network switches that you see in that picture, our firewall and filtering devices, have exceeded their intended life. The intended life of these devices are usually around 8 years, and these devices are at 10 years. So they really do have to be replaced even for now, much less for the future, much more for the future. They are all out of warranties, they're all out of vendor support, and we're at a point where if something breaks, it has to be replaced anyway. We have reached capacity. We cannot grow any further, be it wireless or wired devices. Some of these things are required for PARC, and PARC is the state's new student assessment program that we will be required to participate in 2014 to 2015, which really isn't that far away. And the backbone, as I said, was put together in 2003. And just to give you some numbers from our number guy, Rich Wertz, in 2003, 45% of the students in VHS were in technology electives. Now 90% of the students are in technology electives. But they are still working with the same backbone that was here in 2003. We were supporting 0 in-class teacher computers, and now there's approximately 200 teacher computers on the network. Overall school computers were approximately 200 in 2003 and are now up to 600. In 2003, VHS and DVDs were used in classrooms. Now it's online video and even foreign language sites to support classroom learning and enhance it. The current standards in place for wiring are 10 times faster than what we have present here, and this is a picture that is in all the schools. All the schools have switches like this somewhere that eventually come back to the high school to feed the high school. In 2003, state testing was done on paper. In 2014, state testing is going to be done on computers. And currently, we don't have the backbone or the computer count to support that change. The recommendations from the state for that testing are 100 kilobytes per second per student for a network backbone and the internet connection. Currently, we have 50 meg. Their recommendation is 240 meg. Even if we brought that in, our network can't support that. The way the network is now, we're required to reboot several devices a couple times a week when people can't get to sites that they need to for grading, or to put in testing scores for special education, or things that students even need to access. So it would not be a reliable system what we have currently in place to support this testing. Email is housed here at VHS for all our students, for all our staff. Students don't have email, but their documents are stored here from when they're little to when they get through Verona High School. There is an on-site backup of these devices and documents, but there is no archiving, which email is a big issue to not have archiving available. And we also need some sort of off-site backup in case there is, as we've seen lately, tragedies in the area that take out entire school districts. We don't have a backup off-site for Verona. And that's really the difference in the world now. We built this in 2003 to support what was here and to even grow. But now we've grown. And I think the internet and school environments have grown so much technologically so fast. And we've managed to hold on for 10 years, 2 years longer than really a lot of this probably should have. And we've grown tremendously. But the growth cannot continue with what's in the back of the network.
I have a question. So based on your professional experience, when we look to budget for next year, what's a reasonable percentage? I think we've traditionally treated technology as like, oh, it's like a gadget. But now, like you said, it's really part of our infrastructure, part of our building and grounds. What's an appropriate amount, percent, for us to be thinking that this should occupy within a budget?
In a budget, I would say, depending upon what you want to do, to fix what's here is another story from just a budget.
Yeah, I mean, like if you're a university,
Okay,
or
if we
something
went
that's
and we
going to
fixed what we have here and we leave that out, I think what we need to budget for is a rollover of computers every 5 years. You know, and also not only that, but the life of these switches, like I said, is really 8 to 10 years.
Yeah.
So it really is every 10 years at max.
But what we need to invest, for example, to get wireless up and running at the appropriate level?
At the appropriate level now.
Yeah.
Just to start from scratch, what we put in this was $400,000.
That's just the wireless?
No.
Oh, okay, so that would get us up to...
Yes, because in order to put an appropriate wireless in here, you need to put an appropriate backbone. There's only so many devices that can support. There's no more places to put a plug. So there's no more places to put a computer down and run a wire and plug it in. They're full. We've already invested in a couple new switches, but every time we plug them in, we hope that the network isn't going to come crashing down. And it does from time to time. It's always that, you know, Monday morning at 7:30, nobody can get on the internet, nobody can, and it's not surfing anymore. It's teachers putting grades in Genesis. It's, if we bring Genesis in the house, it's parents getting their children's grades. So the backbone has to be replaced to put a good wireless solution in place, and this has, that price would do all of that.
Right. And then we look, so if our building, our total building budget is, let's say if it's $1 million, then going forward, we should budget about what percent for technology, like 10%, 20%? I'm just trying to get my head around the new reality of how
Right.
technology is part of the buildings and grounds. It's not an extra anymore.
Right. It's, I would say probably 10% to stay current and upgrade and get new computers. The elementary schools right now have very poor computers in them. They really need some help down there. And I think as we roll through them, if we elect to lease, it could end up being a different choice. Or if we elect to purchase, the way we did up here recently. I mean, the high school, when we started in 2003, had 1 computer lab. There's now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 computer labs in the high school, and numerous machines out in the elementary schools. So the budgeting all depends on how fast it continues to grow as well. I do think we have to bring our internet bandwidth speed up just to be compliant with the state. And in order to do that, we don't have devices that can support that speed.
Well, we have a technology plan, right, that is filed with the state. So the plan has all of this in it. The board is responsible to look at the plan when we budget and say, we're budgeting to accommodate that plan. We have a plan.
And I believe the new plan is, we have to do a new plan this year.
It's due, it's a 5-year,
Yes.
3 or 5 year.
3 years.
3-year plan. So it's up to us to, we have the plan submitted, we accept it, we do a formal resolution to say that's the plan, and then at budget time, we say we're just not gonna fund it. So we have to be responsible, that's the board's accountable for that. It's in the plan.
And currently, what percent would you think we're spending on technology?
Out of what
I
needs?
can't say it off the top of my head.
No, I would say we're probably funding about 20% of what we need to, I guess, on an annual,
What we need.
of the maintenance portion of it. Something like
Right,
this
saying
cassette,
400,000 is to get up to snuff, and then another
and then you have
10%
Yeah,
annual.
you have to say for all of the equipment that you have a call it an 8-year, 5 to 8 year cycle of turnover, right? Every year you're taking 15% of audio technology and turning it over. So cycle. What we did in 2003, when this was put in, it was an opportunistic, this was done on a lease at the time because it was when the town was running fiber. And we jumped the bandwagon and said, you're gonna run fiber, rather than us paying for fiber in the future, we said, we'll get on board now, and we did this. What we haven't done since is take the plan that has all of the maintenance and turnover in it and fund it.
Yeah. I mean, I think we've treated this as a maintenance issue also.
Well, it's the same as Mr. McDivitt's. A lot of the stuff that Mr. McDivitt pointed out, you guys have to get to the rest of the presentation, but a lot of stuff that Mr. McDivitt pointed out was in our facilities assessment when we did the referendum. And we only funded, we funded half of it. And Joe will remember when that referendum passed, it was 3,500 votes cast or something like that. It passed by 10 votes. And we only funded 50 cents on the dollar of what we needed. If we would have funded more, probably would have failed. We would have got nothing.
To that point, can I ask Mr. McDevitt about my standing up?
Well, there's a little bit more, you have more to this? How much more do you have?
I'm okay. If anyone has any more questions for me.
Okay, all right. Keep going and then I'll
Yeah.
ask at the end.
Thank you.
No problem.
VHS Music Room Edition, we spoke about this a little bit earlier. The music room is not large enough to accommodate a program that involves nearly 1/3 the student population of the high school, while the last cuts from the last referendum was the expansion of the music room. So if you go by there on a day when Eric Lynch is actually conducting class in there or practicing whatever they do in that room, and you've got all these instruments in there that take up a lot of space, obviously, and then you pack 86 kids in there. It's a problem on a number of levels. It's a problem for Eric, it's a problem for us from a facility standpoint of overcrowding the room. So it's basically a problem. They need an expansion there. And everyone in this room probably knows how great a music program VHS has. I've only been here 2 years. I was never a musician, but I have a lot of respect for that program because they do phenomenal things, and I tip my hat to them constantly because I recognize the amount of work that goes in there between Eric and the kids, and it deserves attention. Verona High School, new and old gym bleachers. Bleachers in both gyms are original, 1956 in the case of the old gym, 1970 in the case of the new gym, as we call it. Neither is code compliant or ADA compliant. Our insurance underwriter noted this deficiency during the most recent site visit, which was only a few months ago. Sections are spreading and unsafe at this point. We could go ahead and repair this, and we need to. But repairs to prevent that spreading are not going to correct those other issues of compliance. There needs to be a major overhaul in these bleachers on both sides to really get them up to speed.
What is that picture on the right?
It shows the spreading in the bleachers. I mean, you can't necessarily tell that from a photo, but the space at the top is only about 2 inches. When you get down to the bottom, it's nearly 12. And that's due to the cabling system below the bleachers is broken. And we have a price to fix it, and we should just go ahead and fix it. This is one of the issues that we're hoping that the township's going to assist us on, because there is a community benefit to this gymnasium with these bleachers, obviously. Topic 3, the challenge. The current facilities budget does not allow us to address these needs. Everything I listed and then a whole lot more behind that is captured in our 5-year plan in our priority matrix. Most of that, probably 90% of what was on those lists doesn't necessarily even make a cut on this PowerPoint. The township may be able to assume the cost of certain projects that can be defined as providing a community benefit, but this will not solve the fiscal shortfall. Basically, we have a fantastic relationship with the township. They do recognize that we have this facilities deficit that is that we're unable to catch up with. So they help us as much as they can in a lot of ways that can't necessarily be defined easily, but they've made it clear to us that these items that, you know, provide a community benefit, an example being the bleachers in the gymnasium, amongst others, is something that they'd be willing to help us to finance or to pay for. And we are pursuing ESIPs, which are energy saving improvement programs, which are subsidized by the state or some other entity which may address some of our issues, but not nearly all, obviously. And those are going to target basically, you know, things like lighting. You know, they'll come in and take care of what they call the low-hanging fruit, where we reap the greatest benefit in savings and apply those savings towards improvements. And basically, those will target, you know, our heating systems, our controls, possibly things like that. But they have the limits, obviously, based on how much we can save. Topic 4, 2012-2013 Facilities Department budget. Our total budget for this year is approximately $2.5 million. 1.375 goes towards salaries and wages. 620,000 appropriated for gas and electric. 56,000 appropriated for sewer and water. 102,000 is appropriated for property insurance. So when you take all that away, you know, what we're left with basically to work with really is $350,000. And $350,000 is $85,000 to $90,000 more than what we've been putting towards the operations aspect for a decade. Now that, you know, all that deferred maintenance, you know, and you're working with a flat budget, that catches up to you. It's caught up to this place, obviously. And then of that $350,000, more than $150,000 is spent on fixed recurring costs. You know, these are things that we can't get away from on an annual basis. Slide a couple more down is going to give some examples of that. And then approximately $200,000 goes towards repairs and improvements. Now we have been working with the number of $200,000 for improvements, but you know, now that I've been here 2 years, I've recognized that $200,000 isn't actually going towards improvements. You know, we're actually able to improve maybe $100,000 to $120,000 a year, and the rest is really repairs. So in the next two in red, this is not a sufficient budget for maintaining the district. In 1998, 1998, and 99, the facility's operating budget was $495,000. So, you know, you compare 13 years ago, we were at $495,000 for the same things that were appropriating $350,000 now. You know, we're going backwards, and we're fighting inflation, obviously. You know, that $495,000 number gets closer to $700,000 in today's dollars. And then you think that we're working with half of that and then still trying to maintain this district. It's basically impossible. You're not going to be able to read this, but this is the fixed cost that I spoke of. And I'll have to get closer to see it too. Boiler cleaning, boiler efficiency testing, which the DEP requires, boiler chemical treatment, which we didn't do for a number of years, and that has a negative effect, obviously. Grease trap treatment, that's a hygiene standard. Here is 6-month surveillance, we're required to do that. Pest control, we need to do that. Fire prevention services, monitoring, we're required to do that, we need to do that. Burglar alarm systems, you know, we need that obviously in place. Playground inspections were required by the state. Playground mulch, required. Fire inspections, required. ECL, all on and on as I go down that list. It's all things that we have to do. It's not an option. So maintenance and custodial staffing. Verona School District is comprised of 6 schools with 390,000 square feet of buildings and 71 acres of grounds to maintain. The facilities department staffing is as follows: 4 full-time maintenance staff, 15 full-time custodians. We've added one since 10-11 to bring it to 15. 3 part-time custodians, which we've added over the last 2 years. 1 part-time groundskeeper. Salary and wage figures also include overtime, kitchen staff, and our mail carrier. So, you know, when we look at that number, it's not just, you know, people that I supervise, it's other people that work in the district as well. And we were actually able to add those 3 part-time custodians without adding anything to the budget because we're working off the overtime. We're reducing overtime by reallocating how the overtime money is spent with saying we're not gonna spend it necessarily on overtime, we're trying to use that money more efficiently by bringing in part-timers at a lower rate and trying to overcome this staffing deficit that we're facing at most of the schools. Staffing levels should be increased to sufficiently maintain our 6 schools. Staffing levels have regressed in the past 10 years despite a 17% increase in square footage since 2008 in the addition of various equipment. So we added about 60,000 square feet to the school district to bring from around 330,000 square feet, 390,000 square feet. But we actually went down in staffing level from 2003 to 2002. So we're going down in the area where we need to be coming up, and we're working in the opposite directions. Custodial staffing level when I arrived in 2010-11. So basically at VHS with 5 people, 2 night, 3 night, 2 day, 3 night. HBW had 2 day custodians and then 2.5 night custodians. And VHS and HBW are essentially equal in size, and the middle school is actually much more difficult to maintain. And if you know the layout of the middle school, you understand why. Multiple levels, a much older building, with the problems that come along with an older building. And then you have the 4 elementaries, where at Forest Avenue we had 1 person working by himself, basically, turn the lights on in the morning, locking the doors up at night for a decade, and that catches up with you. And then FM Brown and Lanning, we're splitting a full-time person at night, so you would only have a full-time custodian working 4 hours at one school and 4 hours at the other. This is a 40,000 square foot building. This is nearly a 40,000 square foot building now since the addition. And then Brookdale was splitting a part-time person with Whitehorn. And same scenario, 37,000 square feet, 1.5 people to maintain. This is where we are now. It may not seem like a dramatic difference, but to the people living and working in those buildings, I think it's a pretty dramatic difference. VHS, we're at status quo. We'd like to increase there, but it's just not there yet. We brought it up to 5 full-time people at the middle school, 4 being full-time employees, the 5th person being a part-time employee, basically working full-time hours. Forest Avenue School, we added a half a person to actually give something, give that building something at night other than just 1 person working the building entirely. Brookdale, same thing. We remain the same. I mean, with the occupancy of Brookdale, it's maybe a little bit easier to maintain than some of the other schools. Lanning, we brought it up to 2 full-time employees, a day custodian, obviously, a night custodian, and then same for FM Brown, day and night. And we did that with only adding 1 person to the payroll as a full-time employee in that time. And then, like I said, the rest is subsidized by full-time employees. Some improvement projects from last year. We've got plenty going on this year, but most of them are incomplete at this point, so we're looking at last year. This is an example of a shared project with the township. The Lanning bathrooms before, and these bathrooms in the center of Lanning had been targeted for a couple of decades to be remodeled, and they just never were. It was just something that just kept getting pushed to the side because of, I'm sure, for budgetary reasons. Lanning bathrooms before were antiquated, inefficient, and unsafe. And when I say inefficient, what they had, and this is pretty common through the district, unfortunately, is that we waste a tremendous amount of water especially in our boys' bathrooms. We have these solenoid activated flushometers in the boys' bathrooms. So every time, if you go around to some of the boys' bathrooms, open the door, and then you'll hear all the fixtures flushing. As soon as you open that door, every time it's open, the water's going on 7 fixtures, 10 fixtures, whatever the number is in each bathroom. So obviously, we're wasting a tremendous amount of water. At least in this project, we were able to rectify that in this scenario at Lanning. Lanning bathrooms after a shared project with the township yielded a more attractive and efficient result and significant savings. We did the project for about $30,000 in-house, including architectural fees, and the projections placed on it by architectural firms that have looked at it placed it at $100,000 or more to do those 2 bathrooms. FM Brown Gymnasium, this was an in-house project, and this was a case of increasing efficiency with new fixtures, but also it was a safety concern because these were fixtures that were not that old, but what they were finding is if you know the FM Brown gym, it's a low ceiling, and the kids, whether it be in gym class or aftercare, kids are kids, they'll throw the balls up the ceiling, they hit the light fixtures, and these lens covers on the fixtures were actually falling off or dangling. So that was a concern, obviously, so we jumped in there. You know, I had actually targeted VHS to do lighting upgrades first, but because of the safety issue, we targeted brown instead. And we changed it to new 4-bulb T8 fluorescents. Basically, they're made for high use areas like gymnasiums. And we put them right up to the girders in the gym, so they're secure. You can hit it with whatever ball you want, and it's not going to shift an inch. They reduced consumption by 50% by going to T8 bulbs. You know, we're at 128 watts of consumption as opposed to a 250 watt metal halide, which is what the old fixtures were over here. And then we increased the lighting lumens from 27 to 48. So a significant increase in DOE actually recommends a lighting level of 30 lumens for gymnasiums, so we're a little bit below. Now we're well in excess of what the requirement is. So that was a win-win. Example of another shared project with the township. You know, it may seem minor, but it just improves the appearance of the district. The old baseball, football shed on the lower field was just an eyesore. It was, you know, just in bad shape. But it was just a great thing to get knocked out with the cooperation of the township guys. You know, new roof donated by a local vendor. Donated material and the time to install. New trim, coat of paint, and spruced up the appearance in time for the GNT, which is a great attraction for the township to host that event. The stage 4 VHS, this is another one that just flew under the radar, I guess, for a number of years. When they constructed the stage 4, I don't know if they really considered the use and abuse it would take, but everywhere where you see this light-colored wood was a patch that they made, and then you'll see tape in various places. The tape was covering new holes that would appear. So they constructed this wood floor, tongue and groove wood floor, over sleepers on a concrete slab with no subfloor. So every time a hole was punched through, because the tongue and groove gave away, you'd wind up with another hole in this floor. And there was a myriad, I can't even put a count on, but it was 40 or 50 holes in this floor at one point. So we were able to get that replaced, and obviously the appearance is 100% improvement, the safety is 100% improvement. Flooring this is an outsourced project. Flooring contractor installed new subfloor, L flooring for more durable, attractive result. So this is the summary. We have implemented new practices and improved, refined old ones to yield a more efficient and productive department, but our needs well exceed our budget. We have a comprehensive assessment of what our needs are based on that 5-year plan and the priority matrix, and we have the data to back it up, which those documents provide us. We need to develop a plan to fund these needed projects and improvements. That's where we're at the moment. We're trying to figure out how we're going to pay for this stuff, because we're past the point of saying, well, we'll get to it down the road. We're down the road now. Now we have to figure out actually how to have the rubber meet the road and get it done. That's it.
Some questions, because your last statement was what I was about to say, that we kicked the can down the road a number of years now. We've had this in our possession for a number of years. We've talked about various things. We've talked about getting help in various ways. But I think it's time to fish a cut bait here. We need to come up with a finance plan for this. But to that specific cause, we have talked about performance contracting. Where does that, performance contracting is a method by which we can spend money, but because of savings, they allow us to do it with a bond issue without actually going out and asking for a referendum on that portion of it. Not that we shouldn't go out for a referendum, which is another whole matter, but where do we stand on that at this point in time in terms of looking into performance contracting?
We've made the initial application. We've enrolled in the ESCO program. Basically, ESCOs are energy saving companies. They're the ones that implement these energy saving improvement programs. And basically what they look to do is they look to take what we already spend on utilities. And for this district, it's in the range of $625,000 to $700,000 given, depending on the year. So they're going to take that money that we already spend, tell us, we can fund a project, you know, in this district's example is $1.5 to $2 million possibly of projects where basically they'll identify the inefficiencies of the district, say, you know, you can do X, Y, and Z to improve upon that, and then the savings you recoup from those projects are going to fund the overall project. So basically that's the premise behind it. You know, obviously there's an incentive for them to do that. They're making money as well. But for us, you know, when we're cash strapped, you know, it's a way to make a leap forward without necessarily having to budget for more or spend more than we already spent. Obviously, it's a very worthwhile pursuit, but it's a lengthy pursuit. Like anything else that's subsidized by the state or any federal entity, there's a lengthy paperwork process, and that's what we're in the process now, is filing that application, taking the steps necessary to get to the next level of an energy audit where they come in and audit the district and tell us, you know, what we can achieve, where we stand. So that's where we're at with that. There's a number of programs available, but any one of them basically target the same items of, you know, they start with the lighting because that's usually where the game goes. So whatever one we fall into qualifying for is going to be worthwhile and to our benefit. But you know, the one we're pursuing right now is subsidized by the BPU, Board of Public Utilities, and it's basically ran by a company called TRC. So once we get to the next stage of that, you know, hopefully a year from now we can speak to the fact that we're actually enrolled in that program. It's a year out.
I think Joe's question more specifically is, so these pages that you handed us are the detailed items that we summarize in that one page. So for example, what you call it there, around the $2.5 million worth of boilers is strewn throughout this. There's various valves, pipes, fitting, that's right, boilers themselves, etc. So is there a way that you can highlight on here which of this you think are the candidates that have a chance of being included, right?
Yeah, we were actually already provided that information by Trainer Sol Rand. Trainer Sol Rand is one of the companies that pursues these types of projects, and they're actually very willing, with no real incentive on the back end for them, to come in and assist school districts with getting this whole thing up and running with the application process and seeing us through. You know, like they have to go to bid for these projects just like any other company that pursues them, but they're one of the companies that sees the upside in the customer service related to helping to guide us through that program. So they actually already kicked back to us. This plan highlighted the areas that they said would be good candidates for their program. So we have that information.
So it's the ones that in the notes. But yeah, that's okay. So there's, like I see one of them, 2 or 3 pages in, it says performance contracting. So they were labeled in here that way?
Pretty much. I pass along the highlighted, because what they did, John, is they kicked this back to us and highlighted the exact line items that would fall underneath that program.
Now, boiler needs, I mean, is this building one of the ones
we don't have a particular boiler need, an imminent boiler need, except at VHS because of the age of this building. The last referendum that they dealt with boilers was 1996, 97. They replaced boilers at all the schools except for Verona High School, because at that time, the Verona High School boilers were only about 14 years old. So it would make sense not to necessarily replace them at that time. Now we're 15 years removed from that.
All right, but is there reason to, at this point in time, look at solar power instead of replacing the boiler? I mean, does that make sense?
I would say it doesn't necessarily make sense from a practical standpoint. I mean, solar is has a lot of positive attributes. It's not necessarily going to heat our high school. You know, the alternatives that I would look for from these fire tube boilers, because basically when that first item of heat controls comes up, it's not just the boilers, it's the whole heating system of this high school. That slide that showed the ruptured pipe below this concrete slab, that's going on throughout the building. That's just one example that went up in the PowerPoint. So really we have to look at the entire heating system for this school as a bundled package. You know, like John pointed out, it's broken into different aspects in that 5-year plan, because you know, we look at it like, you know, what can we necessarily tackle with this chunk of money or this chunk of money. But if we're going to go the route of bundling it all into one package, then it needs to be looked at, holistically, not just one
Just
piece.
to follow up on one other thing is that we didn't spend a lot of time, you had a slide on the upper field, and there was some discussion that we may qualify for some brownfield, is that the right term for it, brownfield money? Who would make that determination, and, how do we know whether we will or whether we won't?
Well, the next step in that is what determines that we would have to do the soil test.
Okay.
Qualifying. I don't think we're any further on that, is what you said to us.
I think we ought to, make a decision, that's what we want to do. Beyond that is that, and I think you're absolutely right, and I think we're all almost in agreement on this, is that we really need to start funneling these things into channels as to where we think the money can come from. And one of the things that I think we might have to think about is a referendum. We went for a $33 million referendum last time. I don't know that we necessarily have, even though that was only 50% of what they identified as in need of repair or upgrading or whatever. I don't know whether we want to be that full or not, but I think we need to start to do that. Now, whether that's going to be a function of Building and Grounds Committee, whether it's a function of the Finance Committee, or it's a function of the full board, I don't know. But I think that we need to start to find out for sure. I mean, even, and I don't want to bring this up in a negative way, but I'm trying to bring it up positive, like we get a lot of support from the community, from the town on this, is that I think we need to know what can they help us with? Are they inclined to want to continue helping us with it? What can we count on them for over an extended period of time? I mean, we have these things that happen, and they send somebody over, and they send us a backhoe or payload or something like that's fine. But can we count on them for continued support over a period of time? I think we need to do that fairly quickly.
Right, so Joe, if you remember, the timeline was, you and I are scheduled, you and I are meant to meet with Joe Martin, some representation from the town council, I'm not sure who the members are going to be yet, and Mr. McDivitt's peers, Mr. McDivitt would be there, Mr. Forte would be there, and we said we would schedule that with the town once we had this presentation from Paul.
I think we ought to make his presentation part of our presentation.
No, it is, it's so that we don't want to walk into the town and say, here's a presentation that the board hasn't seen yet, right? And, but I think the 2 points are, you got the whole story that kind of summarizes it. These sheets are the ones that the town already hasn't handled, but these have been updated because things have happened since, right? But I think I think what Joe is saying is if we can take whatever it is, X millions of dollars worth of stuff here, right? It's not anywhere near 33, but it's still in the seven figures, clearly. And just delineate, say, these are the ones that have a track on the performance contract idea. Like, so all of these are going to go in probably going to be solved in the performance contract, it's just a matter of time. These other ones are going to be solved by some joint commitment of some sort, because with the township where they are clear community benefit projects, like they've assisted with the football field, like they've assisted with a dozen things in the last 2 years or so. But to Joe's concern, and I think he's right, the sorts of things about half, I'm just using a generality here, but half of the items that the township has helped us on have been imminent emergencies, because that's where something happens and it's an immediate need, as opposed to some things that they've been able to help when we've scheduled. So the football field backup plan was an imminent, on-schedule sort of a thing. Helping with the bleachers is something that they are tooling around saying, we may be able to help you with some portion of that.
Paving over the years, they've always assisted.
Paving over the years, and they've always assisted. So there's a track on that. And then that leaves everything else on here that we've got to go figure out, right? On the everything else that we need to go figure out, I want to go back to something we corresponded a little bit today about the boilers with Mr. Forte. And I just use the boilers as an example, so I'm not kind of being accused over the years of being boiler-centric somehow, but it's not. When you look at the numbers, though, and $2.5 million is boilers and related.
That's really, John, that's not boilers, that's really just the heating system for Verona High School.
That's what I'm getting at. So just around this point, so the heating system here is, to remediate the whole thing, is some estimated $2.5 million. And then this building is resolved. The boilers here are about 30 years old. Life expectancy for that stuff is about
20 years.
Is about 20 years. So we're 50% past life expectancy on it, and then no surprise water's coming up out of the ground, right? the boilers that were done in 1997, this is, you know, if we're gonna, so Joe, I can't, you know, we've been up here for so long, we have to, and then Joe and I got back on the board, because one of the things we said was one of the few things that we have not covered, or that is not in flight of improvement, is exactly this. It's just not, right? Like, these sheets, the public doesn't have these, but the top says, I have 200,000, in 2012, 2013, I have $200,000 approximately to work with, and I have 748, 840, and I have about $960,000 worth of work.
Yeah,
That's, you need the breadth
That's
of
just for
the,
this year. When we came up with this plan of spreading out over 5 years, it's basically, we take our highest priorities that we can actually achieve within our budget, we put those into the top category. Everything else that we can't fund, but we know needs to be contended with, drops to the bottom. And then we spread that out based on the most critical things, one up at the beginning half, and then everything else spreads out over time. The problem with that is, you know, like John just spoke of, we were working up with the impression of $200,000 for improvements. Like I said, it actually winds up much less than that. So that, you know, if it's 120, let's say, that means automatically another 80 gets deferred to the next year. And that drops down, and that joins the 743 that was already identified for this year that we can't contend with. So all that gets pushed to the following year. So all this stuff becomes compelling where it just piles up and piles up.
the point I'm trying to make is that because of that effect, right, in 2012, 2013, we sprinkled a little bit more money on the facilities in the budget, right? We went up about 80K. So that means that this 200, you can get a few other things done, which you've listed on here. And then there's about $750,000 of things that we're not going to get to this year. That, we just don't forget.
That's a light year.
That's a light year.
That's a light year.
That's right. So next year, and I'm not going to count the football field, let's take that out. Now the number bumps up to about $3 million.
Correct.
Right? And that's good. And then I'm going to put $200,000 of water on that fire. Right? So I'm going to do 1/10 of that, and then I'm going to take 1.7 million of that and bump it to the next year, which is already at $5 million. Right? So again, I guess just, right? So now just get back to because of the boiler centric again. So the boilers that were done in 1997, they're 14 years old. Right? So they're going 15?
15.
15. About 20-year life expectancy on those two?
Right.
We can't ignore that.
And that's why this plan is laid out for 5 years. If you look at the tail end of that 5-year plan, we've got boiler replacements coming up at
So
5 years, so it's cyclical.
It's cyclical, right. So one of the things that in public finance that we should have, right, is some cycle of debt that goes on and goes on, right?
We'll never be able to address that with numbers.
Just think of the timeline, guys, right? The timeline now says, if we go down the path of the energy performance idea with some things, work with the township on some other things, and and call for a referendum on the rest. Assuming the referendum passes, we're a year out from it passing, right? Now the boiler's 16 years old. Then we have, I don't know, 2 years worth of elapsed time working in, because a lot of the stuff you can't do while school's in
Take
session.
another year to actually implement, so we're 2 years closer.
So now you're 18, now your boilers are 18 years old and you're done. And you got 2 more years before your life expectancy for what got done in 1990s, you know. So we have to start thinking smaller bonds. The big 33 million was a big deal because it had been neglected. We had no debt, right? It's been neglected for so long.
We
So
also have to put additions on buildings. I mean, we're not talking about putting additions on buildings. I mean, we put
This is
additions
strictly
on
infrastructure.
4 of our buildings, 3 of our buildings.
We're not talking about the space.
Right, so, I mean, we're not, and look, I mean, those are structural, things that we don't have to deal with. We're not putting additions on buildings. We just have to maintain what's in the building. So I think we would make a commitment to ourselves is to quantify this over the course of the current year, and certainly by the springtime, start to address quantitatively in terms of dollars and cents what we're talking about, what's on this track, what's on this track, or what's on this track, whether we can count on the town to help us with this, or whether we can't, whether we need to go to referendum, and what we can do in-house. I mean, some of it, obviously smaller things, such as maybe bathroom renovations and things like that. We can get by with doing those things on our own. Sure. But I think that, we got these sheets, we've had them for a couple of years now. Now it's up to us. The ball's in our court. We need to do something. We need to, how are we going to do this? We start you know, we've challenged the community this for a number of years now. We've done, this is how we're gonna have to pay for it. And they're with us or they're not. So, I mean, at that point, that's all we can do.
So we have, so a couple of takeaway points. One is, so can you arrange?
We have a preliminary meeting Tuesday.
No, you two, but we need to
After
get,
that meeting, we'll start the meeting with everybody.
that's perfect. We should do it before before the holidays, right? We need to, we said we met with them last spring, we met last fall, last spring, then we did the public meeting at the end of spring, and it's time, you know, just the cycle is to do it to the meeting, right? So we should go through, that's the township. You guys should pursue the delineation of what's on here that's performance contract related, right? And then we recently appointed the architect, so we need to validate, you know, you have a lot of things on here that are not in the most recent long-range facilities plan because
Right.
they've popped up post adopting that plan. So anything that we do has to be documented the right way, so we need engineers to start to get cracking on that. Right, because you need to do that no matter what happens, right?
That's right.
Right. And then we should tie the, I'm sorry, Joe, and then when we talk about the facilities plan, we should marry, is Cindy still here, did she? Right. And we should tie the technology, even though technology plan is a separate doc, it's got separate aspects to it. It should be done together so that we have a proper technology plan, because, Dawn, your question is a fair question, what's the number per year, right? If it, just from memory, the technology budget this year, this current year that we're in now, is about $70,000. That's what we're spending, about $70K a year on whatever we can spread that on. And, you know, an up year is,
We gotta start to get our heads around the new reality.
an up year is 74, a down year is 68. You know, it's about that. It's not 400.
The other thing that I think that we can help ourselves out with is looking at our debt and do we have any debt that's expiring? Because I know I signed
We checked that.
A lease, it was a 5-year lease. I don't even know what we bought with it, but we're in the third year of a 5-year lease. And look at where our debt is any going to expire in the
Yeah,
near
so
future.
we took a look at that. There's some, we have a call option coming up in about 2 years out. About 2 years out, the first tranche has a call against it.
Okay.
And that's the debt
But even
from,
on these
2006.
purchases, I mean, I don't know what, I don't know what.
That was a technology one, that we bought computers 3 years ago.
All right, how much was it? Was it anything great?
170,000.
170,000.
no, there was 170 total, not per year.
170 total.
Not per year.
No, not per year,
The
right?
payments are 37,000.
Okay, so, I mean, all right, now we're in the third year of that. So 2 years from now, we have some lease purchases of debt that's expiring.
Yeah.
You know, those are the kind of things we have to look at.
We also have an illustration that someone did. We have to validate it before, Steve sent it to me today, but we have to validate it just to make sure that the decimal points are on the right spot, that kind of cost out in today's rates. Now, interest rates are probably not going to, you remember the Fed and the government's going, interest rates are probably going to stay where they are for the next 2 years. So we're probably looking at the same kind of rate that's in that analysis. And it costs out what, pick an amount of money, it'll tell you what the tax effect would be, even how they structure the bond over the 10-year period or whatever. So that would be illustrative too, so you get the sense of what the impact would be.
What's the new the 97 bonds?
The 97 bonds, when we did the 2006 bonds, we wrapped the 97 bonds in it because we brought the interest rates down and wrapped it all together to roll forward. So,
We do 10 years when we refinance,
Bonds, it was 30 years.
it's 30. Our lifetime. Okay. Well, I mean, I just think that we, you know, by the end of this year, we ought to be able to identify how we think we can pay for it, or at least present to the community how we can't pay for it. But I mean, I think we need to start doing that. We have numbers now. Here's what we think we can do. Here's what we can't do without your help, and up to that.
but I think just on the point of what's coming up too, there are other things that we've talked about in needs that are in the long-range plan because they're aged items, they're not new items that you didn't highlight here because they're not imminent need, right?
Correct. There's about $14 million worth of work identified in the long-range facilities plan. And if you go through this 5-page list, a good half of that isn't even identified in here. So these are newer problems that really make up the bulk of this dollar figure we throw around. And the longer things take to play out with the funding source, obviously everything grows and snowballs.
So for example, we talked about, in the past, we talked about lockers, locker rooms, lockers themselves, showers, all sorts of, we have shower rooms that are just completely turned off.
Correct.
Right? That's not an imminent need, but if you, so part of me wants to say, the right way to do this, once and for all, is to do precisely what we just described, right? But then, we should take a look at that long-range facilities plan and say, in a world where you can plan for, pick a number, 8 years out, here's what you would do this 4-year cycle, and then in 5 years' time, we're gonna be back, because the showers are not gonna go fix themselves and turn themselves back up. Or unless we're gonna turn it into a closet.
That's a smaller item. I mean, we touched on the boilers that are 5 years out. Our roofs are also 5 years out. They were put in 97 as well, and that's another $3 or $4 million to replace all the roofs. So, like I said, the number grows the longer we take to get into a fund vehicle.
I think we owe it to the public to show it as a continuum with the whole story in it, because if you don't do that,
Then they get upset when you come back.
I could hear now saying, you just borrowed 33 million and it looks like you forgot about all this. No, we didn't forget about it. We cut it out in order to bring the number down to 33 million. And we'd be spending a lot of time explaining that, and losing sight of the fact that the roof is not getting any younger. The boilers are not, going to stop breaking down, whatever the case. These are boilers, because boilers are an identifiable big ticket thing. The fire, we spent a lot of time, Paul was instrumental when we had the storm emergency meetings and all that. Those fire systems, part of the stress and the anxiety about getting the buildings open, after the hurricane was, did we have enough electricity, was it working everywhere to keep the fire system up? And if it wasn't, we were not opening the schools. Now you have fire systems.
I mean, another thing that
away
we
from
didn't really touch on yet, but kind of falls into a lot of these areas, whether it be technology, the boilers, the fire alarm systems, is that, a lot of the power in our schools and in the township is 3-phase power as opposed to single phase, and without phase protection in place to protect our equipment, every time the power goes out, we could potentially have a surge that zaps that equipment where you're forced to replace it on the spot. I mean, what do you do?
We had that last.
And we went through that last October storm. This October storm, we were more fortunate with how things happened.
Well, to give credit when it was Cindy, came in here to shut everything down so that it was disconnected. But had you not been available that day at that time to go do that, then it would have been different.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we did throughout the district this time, based on the lesson we had last year, the unfortunate lesson, where when the power goes out, that's not necessarily when the damage occurs, it's when the power comes back on. And this year, Whitehorn was the worst example last October. We had significant damage, a lot of money spent to repair equipment that was damaged with that. What happened at Whitehorn last year, if anyone remembers last year's October storm, that part of the town that was affected with the power outage, the power would come back on, go back out. It would come back on again and then go back out. So the problem there is, if your equipment's shut off with the initial loss of power, that's great. And then you turn it back on, assuming you're good to go, and then you lose power again for 10 minutes. Just that 10-minute span of out and then back on zaps the equipment. It can have that effect. So this year, the lesson learned was shut everything down once we lost power, everything basically, down to lighting. And then once we know power is restored by indicators from PS or whatever the case is, then we go on and turn things on slowly, one piece at a time, so we bring everything up, in a sequence as opposed to that surge whacking everything with the initial surge of power. So lessons learned.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, we get to the rest of our agenda here. Do we have any public comment or question on anything on the agenda itself? Dr. Stu,
something on the agenda.
I'm sorry?
I have something off the agenda.
Can you give us then to the public comment at the end? Sure. This is going to go for Superintendent's report?
Okay, I just want to let you know that next meeting, December 11th, I will present the district fact book, and I also have to present the mid-year HIV report. Would you take a look now at I gave it to you in the last meeting, two different calendars. I just wanted you to take a look at them in public. Option 1 and option 2. It was the last 2 pages of that packet I gave you in the comment section. The option 1 and option 2. Option 1 would require some work with the union to accomplish, because it would have the teachers coming back before Labor Day in August for 2 days for our beginning of the year activities, and then the students would start the day after Labor Day. If you look, there's several things that fall that affect the calendar. One would be Rosh Hashanah on the 5th of September. Another thing is when Christmas falls on a Wednesday, you normally don't have school on the 23rd, just because it's a day, just a one Monday. It's a tough day to have good attendance and have a positive day. So the way I set it up here for option 1 would be teachers would come back the 28th and 29th. School would start on the 3rd. You have a full February vacation, and graduation would be June 20th. The thought being on both of these calendars actually is that there's the maximum amount of days before testing. And school gets out on the 20th, where before the hottest part of the summer. Sometimes it happens in June, earlier June. The second calendar would be if we couldn't get the union to agree to come back in August, we would have to have the first day of school for teachers would be the 3rd. The 3rd and 4th would be workshops. The 5th would be off for Rosh Hashanah, and then the first day of school would be Friday the 6th for students. And this would have a reduced February vacation, and it also would still get us out on June 20th, graduation on June 20th. I also like to mention that I built four snow days into these calendars instead of 3, into both of these calendars. I feel like, given what's going on and just in the recent history, I think having 4 in the bank is a little bit more, is probably better for planning for the district rather than having 3. I mean, you could have a year we have nothing again, but I just think, given the fact that we've had these last things, I think 4 days makes more sense. I will work on this. I will have more on this for the December meeting. I would like to give people as much notice as possible if we are going to try to go with option 1. But I have some work to do on that.
My question is, on the spring break, seems to have been moved a week earlier, or maybe even almost 2 weeks earlier than
1 week. By doing that, we pick up 1 day. Because you don't have to have Good Friday and then a week. You have the week includes Good Friday.
Oh,
That's a little more in line with what a lot of other districts are doing now to pick up that day.
Well, when is Easter? Is when on that?
Easter is the Sunday at the end of that, so you go back to school on Monday. What was that?
I guess it's Sunday the 20th.
Right. Right. I sent this out to the administrative team for the feedback, and educationally, everyone feels that option 1 is the best. I think option 2 isn't horrible, though. It's just that, right. I don't like that fact that you start school on Friday.
Yeah.
I'm not crazy about that, but, there's a certain amount of days in there, and, there's a certain, you can only work with certain things. Like, I really don't think it would be a good idea to have school on the 23rd of December. Considering that's a Monday, you're not walking Tuesday. Right. It's not going to be a positive day, I don't think.
No, it won't be.
And I don't want to put any days after the 20th. I don't want graduation to go to the 25th.
No, I think that's good. And historically, maybe not this past year, but prior to that, it seems like graduation came later and later.
Right.
It was almost July before it.
Right. It gets later. And then, not only that, you're taking days from before testing and putting them after testing.
Yeah, which makes sense.
Right. I'd rather have as much.
If we can work on that, we sell it.
Good. I wanted to mention that Gary Farisian, this is in your packet too, the letter. He was awarded North Jersey Section 2 Athletic Director Merit Award for the school year 12-13, and he'll be honored in Atlantic City on March 10th, 2013. There are 4 of these a year, because there's 4 sections in New Jersey, and the way they set it up is that he was selected as the section merit award for this. I wanted to let you know that. I think it's important for us to highlight that. And there's one other piece, is that on December 11th meeting, since we'll have only one meeting, I believe we're going to do resolutions and discussions, just because, I don't know, some of the things I can't wait until.
Right.
And I also gave you, in one of my emails, I gave you a list of proposed dates for the Board of Education. We have that ready for you on the 2nd to decide, on January 2nd. Proposed schedule for the next school year.
Oh, board meeting day, we'll still look at it. I know a couple days next year that we probably should do
I basically just
that.
kept
That's odd, but.
When do we have our reorganization?
January 2nd.
January 2nd.
It's a Wednesday. Because New Year's Eve falls on New Year's Day falls on a Tuesday, and the law is that we have to have it by the 2nd. Okay. Any questions about any of that? No? All right, great, thank you.
Does anybody have, we don't have any discussion items then, do we? Let's do our resolutions.
Resolved that the board approve resolutions number 1 through 3.
So,
Second.
Moved by Mr. Elliott, seconded by Mr. Bolino. Any discussion? Call roll.
Mr. Yunus?
Aye.
Mr. Bach? Mr. Elliott?
aye.
Mr. Bolino?
Yeah.
Mr. Quattro?
Aye.
Resolved that the board approve resolutions number 4 through 8.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Bolino, seconded by Mr. Elliott. Any discussion on 4 to 8? Call roll.
Mr. Yunus?
Aye.
Mr. Bach? Mr. Elliott?
Aye.
Mr. Bolino?
Yes.
Mr. Quattro?
Aye.
Resolved that the board approve finance resolutions 9 through 15.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Bolino, seconded by Mr. Elliott. Any questions on these? Let's have a question on number 9. The Finance Committee reviewed the Yankees camp contract, right? That was done today? Okay. Call roll.
Mr. Yunus?
Aye.
Mr. Bach? Mr. Elliott?
Aye.
Mr. Bolino?
Yes.
Mr. Quattro?
Aye.
Then we have one addendum resolution. Resolved that the board approve addendum resolution number 1.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Yunus, seconded by Ms. Dubois. Any question on these? This one? This is one that we went through Education Committee last week.
This one was the one I emailed out to you because it happened pretty late. So it was sent, but something that we have in place for next week.
Let's call roll.
Mr. Yunus?
Aye.
Mr. Bach? Mr. Elliott?
Aye.
Mr. Bolino?
Yes.
Mr. Quattro?
Aye. Okay, public question or comment?
Good evening.
My name is John Garcia, I live at 105 Cumberland Avenue, Verona, New Jersey. And I'm here tonight to request, and I represent the population of parents that would like to see freshman sports reinstated. I think there's many benefits of freshman sports that we have overlooked or we cut from the budget or removed. And I think that we need to be, although we need to be fiscally responsible, we need to revisit those issues because I think we're underestimating the potential impact that it has on the community and the children. And I think the fact that we omit junior high sports in our education system is further the reason of why it's imperative that we do have a freshman program. And I don't have all the information, and I would like to have somebody please provide it to me to see why we did possibly cut it and if it is feasible to put back into the budget. And some of the questions that I had were, what was the amount that was cut for the programs that were cut? The total amount. What was that total representative number?
I can give you
I mean, you don't have to.
well, I'll give you two parts to the answer. I can give you a little bit of a vague answer, not intentionally vague, of course, but because the cuts that you're describing, as I recall, Joe and I have been on the board the longest, for about 10 years now, and so I don't know what the freshman sport landscape was like prior to that. I just wasn't busy at all. But since Joe and I have been on, there was a series of elimination of sports, sort of on an ad hoc basis. So it wasn't like we went in one day and cut. What we did at the end was we cut just what was left at that point. So for example, girls softball, I remember, there was like a 2-year period where it just wound down. They couldn't have enough to field a team. They didn't have the enrollment, etc. And they just kind of died on the vine, you know. And then we just said, you know what, at this point, forget it. You know, it was that sort of cut. So it wasn't a cut to go in and say, let's save 50K. I'm sure we can find out just on history what sports we did have. I remember there was, I believe it was freshman baseball. I remember 4. I remember freshman baseball, freshman softball. I want to say boys basketball and girls basketball. I want to say, I think that sounds to me right. I don't know if we ever had freshman football. Yeah.
We have had, but I don't know how long ago.
Yeah. To give you an idea.
There has been a freshman program, my understanding.
But it might have been predating the time period I'm talking about. So that's part 1 of the answer. Part 2 of the answer is the right thing to do is to meet with Mr. Forte and Mr. Farician and get a sense of which programs we might be talking about. Because the cost of the programs is basically made up of 3 ingredients. We have one of these sorts of things. One ingredient is paying for staff, essentially coaching staff. There's not all that much money per team, about $1,000 per team. Right?
And were the coaches reduced when those cuts happened?
Yeah, because you can't coach. You know, given one of the challenges we have is, I'm sure you're aware, is we don't have lights on our field, so it's difficult to say you're going to coach a team from 3:30 to 5:30, and then another team from 6:30 to 8:30. 6:30 it's dark out, you're done. So one ingredient is the coaching. That's not a lot of dollars.
I've seen the board minutes, just many volunteer coaches that are approved.
Yeah, volunteer coaches can assist. I think you have to have a staff coach certified, but you're still talking a couple $1,000. And then there's costs for some supplies. So for example, if it was baseball, you'd have to have bats and bags and all those other supplies. And then there's whatever the league fees and travel costs may be, which is all budgeted ahead of time, and there's no, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it was never tremendous. I remember last year's.
It wasn't a lot of money.
It wasn't a lot of money. It wasn't a budgetary issue necessarily. It was more of a participation issue.
What was happening, for example, was even in some sports, and I don't remember which one specifically, but I remember there was one year where the challenge was you had enough participants for a freshman team and a varsity team, and the JV didn't have enough students in it. So the question was, do you just not field the JV team and have a freshman and a varsity, or do you do away with the freshman and just put all those kids on the JV? And it was that. So those are the sorts of challenges that were coming up. Now, granted, at the time, and the reason why I wanted to mention the sports is at the time, the VBSL in town. You're familiar with VBSL, right?
Yeah.
The girls softball was not part of that. The girls softball right now is a very vibrant part of that VBSL program, at least compared to what it was 15 years ago. Yeah, so right, you know the participation in that. So now you have a very healthy set of kids coming in that do play.
And that's where I'm going with this.
Soccer is another one. Verona United Soccer didn't have girls soccer.
Your enrollment is increasing over the next 3 to 4 years.
That's right.
And it's increasing at double-digit pace. So I guess we need to relook at the potential participation. And even if you were to identify the participation in 8th grade, it would give you a good barometer. I mean, the Verona Eagles is a phenomenal, a greatly run program, and the success that they've had, we really, as a community in town, need to transition to the high school. I mean, when we cut freshman football, or 3 years ago, our record prior to eliminating the freshman football team was 20-5. After that elimination, it's 17-14. So there's a significant difference. But more importantly, you have children right now who are in 7th and 8th grade who, when they get up to high school level, it's only going to benefit all classes, because playing time and repetition is being taken away from the juniors to JV level, because you have freshmen now playing in those spots.
Yeah, I don't think anybody would argue the merits of doing it. I think it was more at the time, we didn't have the population to sustain the few sports that we had, and then it just kind of just wiped out what we developed of it. But I think you raise a good point, and I think that, like I said, the right thing to do is to meet with Mr. Forte and Gary Felicia and think what viability there might be, especially since you have these, because two things have changed. The feeder programs have changed, number one. Number two, it's not just at the high school. The HP is at a recent period of time, all-time highest. We're up around over 600 students at HP. Over 600 students. It's what Joe and I, 10 years ago, that was about 500 students. It's up a lot. So it's a good time to take a look at it. I think it's a great idea.
All right, so I'll go with Mr. Forte.
Yeah.
And
I just want to tell you, you're about the 10th person, I have to say 10th parent that has brought this up to me as an issue that they feel is important, due to the fact that there's more children that are now taking part. Second thing is that it is the feeder program for the varsity team. And the third thing was, there were a few, if I had to estimate, I'd say 2 or 3 parents that told me that one of the key reasons why they didn't want to go to Verona High School is that they didn't have freshman sports. They felt like some of the kids, they get lost in the shuffle. They don't get enough playing time, and they get discouraged and they don't want to play.
yes, I mean, that's the common
And
feedback.
there's some cuts too. So you're not the first person to mention this to me. There's been at least 10 parents when I'm out and about that talk to me about it, and a few use the reason that is the reason why they felt was a part of the reason why they chose to go to a different school. So it's definitely something that it's a big thing in my heart too.
Sure.
And I've already brought that up one other time too. I think it's something we have to revisit. So.
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, and it doesn't sound like it's a financial issue at all, let's look together as a group at a pay for play program.
Well, yeah, that's what I was mentioning about the costs. One way to bring back that is to make the costs not the topic. And keep the topic to, we have the participation to field the team in a sustainable way. Because the cost is not that, you could go to pay to play for that and it wouldn't be de minimis. It would be de minimis.
The children are paying pay for right now for sports.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I know that a couple years ago, Mr. Bruno and I talked about it in the athletic committee meeting in terms of bringing it back just before you became public opinion to bring it back. Unfortunately, at the time, we weren't able to make it work. But I know one thing we said was, as public opinion turns for it, we'd be able to obviously better justify and better find our funds and better have that discussion with the community to bring it back. I think it's a great idea. It's definitely something that the athletics committee has looked at in co-curricular, in the past. And I do remember the decision when we kind of brought down the final acts when funding went crazy in New Jersey and all budgets were reduced. That it was a difficult, time. And that doesn't mean that we shouldn't move forward and bring it back where appropriate and where we can sustain it. So I think definitely contact Mr. Forte and Ms. Friesen.
Just once you give us your number when you step down.
We also, I just want to mention, there are ways to do it where it's even less cost. For example, and I'm going to use this as an example, in football, you don't necessarily have to have a full team. You could also play a few games. We did do that this year. We played a couple freshman games, and then we didn't have a freshman team, but we played a JV game, and then we played a freshman game too. So we have to increase opportunities for kids to play, not just practice. I think that's an issue, because that will discourage people from being involved.
Certainly, and the other components are, and I think it's fruitless to bring up the field today, but there are minor issues like the weight room, the condition of the weight room, and other athletic facility areas that definitely need improving, as do the bathrooms and boilers. And the good thing about, we still have a freshman football class, there's many plumbers, there's some playing in class. Maybe you get some boiler gear.
Get some good old bond raising along
Thank you for your time. It's really important to a lot of people that are in that group, and it seems like it's a no-brainer for the community, especially if the finances are mentioned.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you. They can reach at this number, right?
Yes.
Anybody else?
Divot for an excellent presentation tonight. As you know, I taught here in this district for 18 years, and I can tell you that maintenance has been the stepchild in this district from way back. It's not all your fault, although I must say, if you haven't funded where you felt you could in the last few years, then you're partly responsible. But I hear a very different tone tonight. And I would like to encourage you not to wait to the say, the end of the school year, but let's talk about the end of this year, 2012. Let's get some decisions made to move. I've already talked to Mr. Elliott about a way to possibly work with the town. And you just got to step up and do it. Don't sit back and wait. This is something that the longer you put it off, the more expensive it gets. And it's been this way for years and years. So you can't put it all on yourselves. But what you have to do is step up to the plate and say, this is what we need. Excellent ideas about cycling some things that you know are going to be recurring costs, going to work with the town. Just move on it. Don't sit on it. Let's just get going on it. We need that maintenance taken care of here in town.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's great to hear from you about that. Thank you.
You said you taught it for 18 years, that means the boilers were already 3 years past life expectancy. Anybody else? Okay, our next meeting is December 11th at 8 o'clock. We have a private session at 7 and a public session at 8 o'clock. Close the meeting.